The reason I'm feeling upset right now is because of a thought I'm thinking. Welcome to the Connect Method Parenting Podcast, where correction is out, connection is in, and your kids want to listen to you. I'm Andy Martineau, creator of Connect Method Parenting, here to help you stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what. Yo, everybody, how are you doing? All right, so let's just jump right to it today. I want to talk about the difference between blame and responsibility. When I'm working with parents in league, this topic comes up all of the time. It happened recently when I was trying to teach a mom the difference between taking responsibility for something versus blaming for something. Because as parents, this is such an easy line to cross. And we go into blaming ourselves for a lot, especially us moms. We blame. We beat ourselves up, and we've got to stop because it's preventing us from taking responsibility. It's preventing us from changing. So we're calling it out today. And if you find yourself in the blame camp sometimes, know that you're in good company. I land there sometimes. I used to basically live there. I lived there. That's why I know so much about it. So we're all going to vacillate between blame and owning and taking responsibility for things. It's not a problem, but I want to bring it up so that we become more aware when we're slipping into one or the other, and we can get out of blaming and into owning and taking responsibility faster. So there's two ways we typically use blame. First, we blame ourselves, or we blame other people. And I would also include situations and put the reason why this is happening on ourselves, other people, or situations. So I guess three ways. So it gets tricky, right? How is taking responsibility then different from not blaming ourselves? And it's huge. There is a huge difference. And in fact, they're on completely opposite sides of the spectrum, both emotionally and from a productivity standpoint. One is completely unproductive. One is totally productive. And one feels terrible. One feels great. So very different. Taking responsibility for how we feel, for what we do, for what we think, for the results we get in our life is the opposite of blaming. Now you might be saying, well, I mean, if I'm blaming myself, I'm clearly putting the responsibility of why this happened on me. No, not really. We're indulging, we're dwelling, we're spinning in an unproductive cycle that will never get us out. So it's more of a muddled version of trying to take responsibility. I think it comes from a good, honest place. We come by it honestly. We're trying to take responsibility, but when we do the blame game on ourselves, we can't truly take responsibility. Nothing changes. So how you know the difference, the main way you know the difference is how you feel. When you're taking responsibility, you're feeling capable, you're feeling clarity, you're feeling ownership, you're feeling movement. But if you're blaming, you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling confused. So think about how you feel when you're taking quote unquote responsibility or you're trying to own your stuff. Are you doing it in a way of ownership or are you doing it in a way of blame, beat yourself up? I want to first talk about how this affects the relationships we have with other people, specifically our children, but also beyond that. So first and foremost, I want to remind you that emotions are created by both our subconscious and our conscious beliefs. So you could say that we self-generate, even if we're not conscious of our emotions, we self-generate our emotions. Otherwise, every human would have the same set of emotions around the same situation. This is easier to remember when we're looking at our kids and we see them throwing this big tantrum or having a massive attitude about, for example, doing their chores. And we can look at them and say, oh my goodness, his chores are going to take him 10 minutes max. He doesn't need to be making such a big deal about this. And it makes total sense that he would need to contribute to the family. So from our point of view, we can see that his thought error is either something like he shouldn't have to do chores, or chores are so hard, or my chores are so overwhelming. And that thought error, whatever it is, whatever combination of that it is creating his emotional distress. And if he just would change his thoughts to something like, it's fair that I have to do chores and contribute to the house, it makes total sense, and it's not that big of a deal, I could probably get this done in 10 minutes, that he'd be feeling much better and he'd be able to get his chores done. So yeah, it's so much easier to remember that our emotions are created by our beliefs when we're looking at someone else. But when we're feeling terrible, when we're upset, when we're hurt, that's really difficult sometimes for us to remember that all of these feelings that we're feeling are self-generated. It's super easy to believe our feelings are caused by other people, which is never the case, no matter how real that feels to you. Other people can't force us to have a specific emotional experience. So when we blame someone else for our emotions, we aren't taking responsibility for our emotions. If you want to get really clear on it, when you say, that person made me angry, or that person hurt my feelings, or that person or situation made me have a bad day today, they frustrated me. How many of us say this? All the time we say this. We do. We blame other people or situations for how we feel. But what we're basically doing is we're saying, no, that emotion, it wasn't self-generated. That emotion, I had no control over it. It was caused by this other person. So we're giving that person or that situation credit, ownership, total responsibility for our emotional life. We're delegating to them as if they're responsible for how we feel. Now, if you're in League, you might be wondering how this squares up with the primal emotions that our children have that drive them to togetherness, that drive them towards safety and security. So let me answer that. Yeah, it's true that both our kids and us have these primal emotions that are coming from a subconscious, eternal drive that motivate us towards reconnecting with the most important people in our life. They aren't conscious of it. And there is this default belief system that's embedded into our nervous system that moves us towards preserving proximity, that gets us alarmed when it looks like there's a threat to togetherness. So it moves us to caution, that creates frustration in us, that motivates us to fix situations that aren't working for us or for our kids. So yes, they have these instinctual emotions. And because our children lack the capacity, they have less ability to have the awareness around emotions than adults do. Those emotions often just take over their nervous system and drive them, which is actually really great for them biologically because they needed to have secure relationships with adults in their life for survival. They need that today. They needed that 1,000 years ago. So it's important that our children have this and that they don't have the ability to override it. But they are still coming from an internal belief system. And as we become older, we have the capacity, we have more awareness, we have the ability to adapt and integrate our emotional world and with our internal belief system in a more conscious, intentional way. So we're able to adapt and navigate these big emotions from a more conscious place. So we still are the source of our emotions, whether we're conscious or not conscious of it. And as we get older, we become more conscious of it. So if you feel like there are emotions that take over your body, I used to say, I just had no control. My body just took over. And sometimes it feels like that. You feel like you have no control. I hear you. I understand what you're talking about. I've been there. I've felt that. And here's the good news. Even though that might be the case sometimes, we can do something about that. It might take time and lots of patience. It might require so much repetition and practice to create more safety and awareness and capacity to ultimately create a new neural pathway that can interrupt some of those old default programs that get us to do stuff that doesn't serve us as we become an adult. And ultimately, you have this ability to change or modify your perception so that they serve you better. And we can learn to feel our emotions so that they don't drive us to do things we don't want to do. So it all goes back still to this truth that nobody is generating our emotions for us. So even if we're not conscious of it, it's something that is coming from inside of us. And it's something that ultimately we can change. There is something that we can do. But when we're blaming someone, we're holding them accountable. We're giving them credit for how we're feeling and how we're experiencing the world and the problem we're having. And when we do that, we completely disempower ourselves. We completely lose our ability to respond. We lose our response ability. When we blame other people, we give it all to that other person. And then they're the cause of how you feel icky. So they have to be the cause of how you feel better. Now it's all in their hands. So then they have to take some action or do something. They have to change for us to feel differently. Very disempowering. Now, most of us, when we think someone's hurt our feelings, we don't want to have to rely on them to feel better. And yet, most of us do just that. We delegate our emotional life to them and we want them to change. So when we say, no matter what someone else does, we take responsibility for how we feel about it. Then we're empowered to feel better. We are able to feel different. We can then respond in the way we want to respond without feeling out of control, without being reactive or activated, regardless of what we want. Now, some people will say to me, well, in that moment, it sure does feel like I have no ability. Like I can't do anything about it. And I get that. There are times when I snap at people or I get frustrated or I can feel my body reacting to what someone's saying. And I want to blame them for how I'm feeling. I want to say, you're bugging me. You're frustrating me. You're driving me crazy. But that's not true. It really seems true though, doesn't it? It really seems so true. And I love the fact that it's not. No one can drive me crazy. We're getting ready to go on a big family trip. We leave in 3 days. The house is a wreck, you guys. Like, laundry is being done in the most haphazard way. There's clothes all over the place, on my bed, on the floor, in the front room. Random packages are arriving from Amazon because people are ordering those last few items that they forgot about. And so we have boxes everywhere, all over my kitchen table, on the couches, piled up by the garbage can. I don't even know what all these things are. There's dishes in the sink because everyone's been so distracted getting their stuff ready that they haven't been doing their dishes. The kids have been hanging out with their friends before they go to say goodbye to everybody before we leave for a little bit. It's been raining, so there's mud and dirt on the floor. Last night, our dog got sprayed by a skunk just before we went to bed. The trash, like I said, hasn't been taken out. The bathroom, I went in there and I couldn't hardly even, I just had to close my eyes because there was stuff everywhere. The girls like to do these photo shoots, and yesterday, because we're leaving for a little bit, they decided to do some photo shoots with their friends, but they were in such a hurry, it all got left out and it wasn't put away when I was wrapping up my day. Then people have been stopping by, random people have been stopping by, and I just want to cringe and tell them, no, you can't come in. Our house looks so terrible. And I haven't been doing anything to solve the problem of the messy house because I'm trying to get all of my stuff done and caught up and even front load some extra things before we leave, both with myself and with paying bills. And there's all these things that I need to do that have put the house on the back burner. But my brain has been wanting to make me crazy and blame everybody for the state of the house. I think nobody's house should look like this. My kids, they know better. Why are they not doing better? So what fascinates me is my kids seem to be completely unaffected by the house. They aren't bothered. They're totally fine. They think it's great. They let their friends come in and see it. Yesterday, my youngest daughter's friend came over and I said to her, I'm so sorry about my house. And you know what she said back? She's like, it's totally fine. It reminds me of what my bedroom looks like. I about threw up inside myself because I thought if my house is looking like a teenage bedroom, this is a problem. But to them, they're like, no problem. This isn't causing me to be crazy. I said something yesterday to everybody when I walked down the stairs one time and I saw the disaster. That's my brain is calling it the disaster. And I said, hey guys, the house is kind of messy, right? Thinking, oh, I'll just kind of lob that out there and they'll take it and run with it. They're like, Mom, it's not that messy. My default brain was like, what are you talking about? Are you looking at the same house as me? But they were thinking it was great. I was thinking it was terrible. And I started watching my brain. I have a tendency when the house is dirty. This is a weakness. This is a deep neural groove where when I'm having a lot going on in my life or I'm a little stressed, my brain wants to just run rampant down this crazy house needs to be perfect mode. And I'm going to try to get everybody else on board. I could sense it wanted to go there, was starting to go there, was trying to watch it. And I know this about myself, but that doesn't make my brain not want to do it. It wants to serve up these old beliefs to me for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so the way I feel, this emotion that I'm feeling as I'm just watching it and I'm observing myself and I'm not believing it, I'm not being taken over by it. I'm seeing the frustration, the tendency I want to blame everybody, not take responsibility, and feel annoyed and upset. I can see all these emotions. They're trying to come in, but I see what's happening. I see what's happening. What's the difference? My thinking about it. My kids thinking about the house. Oh, it's pretty clean. It's no big deal. Not a problem. I don't really even notice. For me, my brain is saying, I need you to stop everything and get this house cleaned right now. So here's the truth. The house is not responsible for me being annoyed. Part of my brain wants to. I'm looking at that part and saying, oh, thanks for showing up today. I know you're trying to keep me safe. I don't know what from, but I know that's It's been logged in my brain because cleanliness creates some type of safety for me. I got that story somewhere along the line. So I say to this little part of me, oh, thanks for trying to keep me safe. I'm not going to let you drive today. I'm going to put you in the back of the bus. I'm not going to be fooled into thinking that my house is responsible or my kids are responsible for me being annoyed. So I'm this observer in this moment. I'm trying to take responsibility for my own annoyance. I'm seeing how my brain wants to blame the house. It thinks everything's terrible. I'm thinking, you guys are so lazy. Why aren't you picking up over yourselves? It's really annoying. I've made it all about the house and my kids' messy habits and use that to justify my annoyance, which if I let it run wild would leave me blind. It would leave me blind to the truth of what was really going on here. I would be stuck because the truth is my house and my kids are not making me feel this way. That's what my brain wants to say. They're making you feel this way. But there's another option. If I take responsibility for being annoyed, then I get to have some control here. I may or may not say anything to my kids about this. And I didn't actually say much because I could tell if I opened my mouth too much, my nervous system would try to take over. That triggered part of my nervous system would try to take over. So oftentimes it's better to just be quiet. And yesterday, as I was looking at the house and I could tell my nervous system was getting activated, I kept telling the part of me that wanted to be activated, thank you so much. I don't need you. I appreciate you, but I don't need you. And I would continue to strengthen the part of me that's owning this, that's taking responsibility and realizes ultimately it's okay. It's okay to feel this way. It's okay to have judgments. It's okay to have these triggers. And it's also okay to not act on them and to start questioning them. And the more I did this, the more I began to remember clearer and clearer and stronger that I'm the one causing this for myself. And I can come from a place of non-annoyance, actually. And I could ask my kids to help me or not, but it's not their fault that I'm having these thoughts or having these emotions. And if I want to do something productive, then I have to own it. I can just change my thoughts about it, which I've been able to do fairly well this week. I'm fascinated as I walk down the stairs and I see the mess laid out before me because I can see my thoughts wanting to be triggered. And I think that's because the house is messy. That's the default. I think it's because the house is messy. But then I can instantly feel myself being so disempowered by it and it makes me crazy. And it's funny and entertaining to watch my brain try to go into both modes. Own it, blame. Own it, blame. Thank goodness I've had lots of years of practicing this because it switches pretty fast, but it still wants to do it. We're all a little bit different, but we all have those moments that we have practiced blaming other people or ourselves for how we feel. Like if one of our kids yells at us, if someone forgets our birthday, if a child refuses to do their homework, if someone tells you something you really didn't want to hear, if one of your kids says something rude, you might be tempted to blame the situation or the child or the person. But we get to decide how we feel about it. You can either think, oh, it's no big deal, or you can think, oh my gosh, we can never be friends, or oh my gosh, child, you are in so much trouble, or oh my gosh, kiddo, you're making my life so hard. So think about it. Are you blaming someone for how you feel? Are you blaming someone for what they're doing? Are you blaming someone for the way you are reacting? Are you blaming them for how you're showing up right now, for your behavior? So let's be honest, we all have bad days where we blame the day, we blame the weather, we blame the kids, we blame the mess or the traffic for how we're thinking, for how we're feeling, for how we're acting. This is blaming. The way you know that you're blaming is it feels negative. You're going to notice that you feel disempowered, weak, hopeless, out of control. Okay, so that's how you're going to know when you're blaming. Blaming's not useful. All it does is it gives your power away and it gives it away fast. It gives credit to something that isn't responsible. It's like when people say, hey, it's raining outside. And somebody will say, I feel miserable when it's raining outside. Well, I love the rain. I love the rain. So for me, the rain creates a totally different experience, which means the rain isn't responsible for the emotional experience someone's having because someone can see rain and feel depressed and someone can feel rain and feel elated. I'm in the second camp. I love the rain. Love the rain. The person is responsible for how they feel. Same thing when the sun comes out. We have thoughts about what that means. We have associations with that situation that determine what we feel. To be honest, Phoenix, sun shone every day of the year pretty much. So sometimes I was kind of tired of the sun. But it's interesting because I've talked to my friends who live in places that are really cloudy and rainy. And for them, they never do anything but celebrate a good sunshiny day. So we have different experiences based on our perceptions, which means these things outside of us, these people, these situations, they cannot be the thing that are creating our emotions. Otherwise, we would all have the same emotional experience. Now, let's talk a little bit more about blame versus responsibility when it comes to ourselves. So what's the difference between blaming ourselves for yelling at our kids, blaming ourselves for getting frustrated that the chores aren't done, blaming ourselves for getting into a fight with our teenager, versus taking responsibility for it? When we're beating ourselves up or blaming ourselves, we're saying, hey, it's your fault. How could you do this? We're shaming ourselves. Why didn't you get this right? You know better. It's always negative. Blame is always painful. When someone blames you for something, you can associate that, right? You can remember an experience where someone blamed you for how they felt, for something you did that created something for them, but they blamed you for it. It feels negative. Now, when you take responsibility for something, notice immediately how empowered you feel. It's so empowering to feel that responsibility, to that ownership around something, even if we're owning something that we wish hadn't happened, that we wish we hadn't done. I'm going to own the way I showed up last night. I'm going to take responsibility for the way I lost my temper at dinner. I'm going to fully step into the truth that I was the reason that I yelled last night. It was me. I take responsibility for that. But I'm not saying what a terrible person I am. How can you ever act that way? You're so ridiculous. How dare you? What's wrong with you? You're so out of control. I'm not doing that. That's blame. So let's compare it again. When I show up like that, and I start blaming myself, I feel very disempowered. But if I say it like this, hey, I disagree with how I showed up at bedtime last night. I had great intentions, but I wasn't able to live up to them last night. I want to understand what happened so I can do better next time. I feel upset because I don't like the way I showed up during bedtime. I don't like what I was thinking or feeling. Part of me feels really sad that I showed up that way. Part of me is really upset that they wouldn't go to bed. I was tired. That's interesting. That's interesting that I'm thinking that. I wonder what I could do differently next time. The reason I'm feeling upset right now is because of a thought I'm thinking. Now, this is the ultimate in responsibility. I'm taking responsibility for how I see. I'm describing myself. I'm understanding why I'm feeling this way. I'm owning the thoughts in my brain. Now, that gives me so much empowerment to want to change, but also to be able to change. So this is the ultimate in responsibility. I'm taking responsibility for how I feel, especially when I'm not liking how I felt or what I did or how I thought. I'm describing to myself why I was feeling that way. I'm owning the thoughts I have in my brain, and it's giving me so much empowerment. It's setting me up to be able to change. I'm not triggering my already triggered nervous system. We're already activated. We're in that fight flight mode. And when I start beating myself up, I'm basically re-triggering myself. I'm defending myself against myself. I'm going into fight or flight mode against myself. It's really hard to change from that activated, defended place. The truth is, I'm just one thought or belief away if I own it. And I can access that, and my nervous system can understand that nothing's gone wrong and feel safe so that we can work through it. But if I beat myself up, if I blame myself, if I make myself wrong, a million thoughts away from being able to actually change, to do something better, because I'm triggering myself against my triggered nervous system. So I'm piling up the layers of emotions and thoughts and the negativity that I have to work through before I can actually get to the root of what's going on and understand it and do something productive. It's very unproductive to blame. So if you're working on a relationship with someone and you want your relationship to be better, you can either blame them for how you're feeling, why it's not good. You can blame yourself for what's going on, why the relationship isn't better. Or you can just take responsibility for what's your portion to take responsibility for. I'm not saying you take responsibility for stuff that's not yours, but you take 100% responsibility for what's yours. The beauty of taking responsibility is then you're going to be able to start to make the changes you want to make. Blame leads to no action because it's completely disempowering. You're beating yourself up. You're beating the other person up, whether it's mentally or verbally. And it leads you to a full-on steer. You know what I'm talking about if you're in league, this full-on, this is the situation and the thought I had and the emotional response and the actions I took and the results I created on blame. And we just live in that steer. And if you write that out, and I encourage you to, for clarity and for understanding on how to move forward, look at what that steer looks like when you're in a blame cycle and how disempowering it is and how it doesn't lead you to wanting to take any productive action. It just leads to actions that keep you spinning. It's indulgent, it's non-productive. Now compare that to when you take responsibility and you're owning something. Now you're developing this authority, this empowerment to do something about it. Taking ownership doesn't mean there's fault in it. There's no blame in it. It's a clear way to evaluate, hey, what's working, what's not working, and what do I want to do differently next time? And that's when you begin to make the change you want to make in your relationship. Now, when you own all of those parts of you, when you own the part of you that snapped, when you own the part of you that lost their temper and thought this negative thought about them, things change. You'll say, oh, the reason I snapped at my child is because she was being rude. That's blame. That's not taking ownership. Versus the reason I snapped at my child is because I didn't manage my emotional life there. I showed up in a way where I was not consciously aware of what was really going on. I didn't take control over my mind and find a more peaceful place to be. Hey, I reacted. I snapped. That's on me. I'm going to take responsibility for that. I don't like how I showed up. I disagree with what I said. My child didn't make me do that. She's not responsible for what I do. I'm the reason I snapped at my child. My child is not the reason I snapped at her, but with no blame. I always say that our behavior makes perfect sense to our nervous systems. There's a reason we couldn't tap into our full capacity for patience or compassion or love or whatever it is. There's a reason why we couldn't tap into that, and it makes sense to our nervous system. So can we understand that? I'm taking full responsibility. That's on me. I own it. But I'm not beating myself up for it, because if I could have done better, if I could have been more patient, if I could go back in time and do that scenario again, and I had the capacity to tap into more love and more patience, would I tap into that? Absolutely. I've never had a parent tell me no, because the truth is, if we were capable of showing up more loving, we always would. We still might need to set a firm limit. We still might not be okay with what's going on, but I would have handled it in a way that I wasn't snapping or frustrated or upset. So I may not be able to change what the child did, but I can definitely change the way I reacted to them, the way I snapped at her. And I can change my false belief, my thought error that it was her fault. Now, if I blame her, the only way I can stop snapping is if she changes. But the truth is, I can stop snapping even without her changing. I can stop being short and getting frustrated. I have the ability. I have the response ability. I love that. I have the response ability to do that. I have the ability to respond the way I want to when I take responsibility for how I'm thinking about something, for how I'm feeling about something, or for how I'm acting towards my child, or towards my friend, or towards myself. And here's the thing, you get to decide in every situation how you feel. And it's so powerful, because if we are upset about something, we can own it. Now, maybe not in that moment. Sometimes I say that and someone will say, hey, but it didn't feel like I had the choice in that moment. And sometimes we don't have the capacity to make the choice in the moment because we haven't done the work to prepare ourselves, to prepare our brains, to create a new neural pathway to show up that way. But the amazing thing is, if we do that work, we will have the capacity to start having the ability, the agency, the freedom to decide in every moment how we want to show up. Now, we're not going to be perfect. We're humans. But to know that that's our potential and to try to maximize our potential, that gets me excited. And it doesn't mean that you have to change how you're going to feel. You might still decide that you want to be upset about something. That's valid. But wanting to be upset and taking responsibility for feeling upset is very different than blaming someone else for being upset. So if my husband comes in here and says, how are you feeling? And I say, I'm upset. And he says, well, why are you upset? Well, because of this, and it's making me anxious and I'm frustrated. When I show up like that, I'm totally disempowered. And I'm not saying that this might not have happened yesterday as I was trying to sort out my brain with the house. Yes, we're talking about the house again. I mean, I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that allegedly there was a situation where I found myself vacillating between being frustrated and blaming the kids in the house for how I was feeling versus owning it. And I may have told my husband about the situation, and I may have said, doesn't the state of the house make you really anxious too? And he was like, no, it's not a big deal. And I wanted to say to him, listen to me, Scott. This is going to make you upset. We are going to be upset about this together. This is an upsetting situation. It really showed me that he wasn't upset at all. He really didn't think it was a big deal. He was enjoying his day. He wasn't frustrated about the house. He was thinking it's going to get resolved. We're just in the middle of a big packing storm. He wasn't willing to even entertain the idea that he should be upset about it at all. He was not even needing to let it go. There was nothing even to let it go for him. It was really amazing and fascinating. Now, I'm not saying that I was able to immediately switch off the low-grade agitation I had about the house. It took me a little bit. I was stressed about a whole bunch of stuff. And what I found is when we have a collection of things, they might not even be related. And I don't think mine were related necessarily. I was thinking about 500 things that I needed to get done before we leave on this trip. And so I had all of this pressure, and it was weakening my capacity because I think sometimes we come up against situations that we're not as practiced at. So this is unique. This isn't something we do every day, so I'm not as practiced at it. And because of that, I was wrestling with my brain, really wanting to be indulgent in this upset, frustrating part of me and really wanting to feel disempowered and blame my kids for how I was feeling. I was noticing it and thinking, what is happening to my brain? And I really wanted to fix it because I don't like being in that place. Sometimes we just got to observe it. I tried to rope my husband in because, it's always fun to be miserable with someone else. He didn't play with me. So thank goodness. And so my brain sat there thinking, part of me feels frustrated and part of me totally gets it. This is called the mixed emotions, the on the other hand emotions. And the cool thing, I'm really glad that this happened, is I wasn't able to convince my kids to want to clean the house. Like I said before, they didn't actually see that it was that dirty. They didn't think it was a debilitating mess. They didn't think it was embarrassing. I tried to say, hey, isn't this house pretty terrible? And they were like, nah, it's not that bad. Now I realize as I'm evaluating this that it was a bad idea. And I realized that I didn't want to change how I felt about the house. I wanted my kids to change how they felt about the house because then that would make me feel better about the house. And I sat there noticing myself for a little bit. I decided to just agree to disagree with my kids. My higher self came in, thank goodness, got some more clarity, and it felt really great because I saw how I was thinking about the house was the problem. I thought that if the house got cleaned, then I would feel better, which would not be true. It would just be my thoughts about the house would be better. And how if my kids would just clean up the house, all my problems would be solved, which wasn't the case. There were a lot of reasons why I was feeling a lot of emotions yesterday. I didn't have time to clean it. I didn't want to clean it. I wanted them to clean it. At the end of the day, it's so fascinating because I could have handled it even better. I feel like I did an okay job. It was just the perfect scenario leading up to recording this podcast of the wrestle our brains have sometimes, even when we've practiced. It's still there and it's not a problem. Totally fine. It's good to be human. Choose human over perfection any day. I love the messiness. I love our brains. I love seeing when it tries to trick me into being disempowered. And what was funny is that the whole reason I was frustrated is because I wanted the kids to manage my emotional state for me. I was struggling with my emotional state yesterday. There was a lot going on. And I thought, if the kids could just manage this for me, things would be better. And you know what is the craziest thing is this morning I woke up really early to get this podcast episode done, and someone had picked up the entire house. It happened after I went to bed. I didn't ask anybody to do it. I'd made peace with the whole mess, gone to bed. I wasn't worried about it, wasn't stewing about it, wasn't feeling frustrated about it. And as soon as I dropped my controlling, negative, blaming way of feeling and thinking about it, someone decided to clean it up. Magic. That's so often what happens to you guys is once we own up, we take responsibility, it frees up that other person or people to act differently. But I didn't need them to act differently for me to feel better. I'd finally gotten there on my own. I didn't need the house to be clean for me to feel better. I was feeling great. I was feeling excited for our trip. I'd accepted that the state of the house is what it was. And then I was pleasantly surprised, shocked actually, to find the house cleaned this morning. The kids are still asleep, so I don't know who did it. I'm going to find out and tell them thanks for going the extra mile. But what's great is I didn't need them to do it for me to feel better. And they didn't do it because I guilt tripped them into doing it, or they thought something terrible would happen if they didn't do it. So I share that with you because when we own ourselves and our thoughts and we stop blaming other people for it, our whole world will begin to shift. Okay, so ask yourself when you're in a situation, when you're working on a relationship, ask yourself, am I in blame of other people? Am I in self-blame of myself? Or am I in responsibility and ownership? Clean, I'm taking 100% responsibility for what's mine, nothing else. Are you in that state? Self-blame or other blame? And the way you know the answer is by how you feel. Do you feel disempowered or do you feel empowered? Now, sometimes taking responsibility for a mistake you've made can be really humbling, but it will also feel empowering. Owning our mistakes, owning our mess ups, owning our misgivings, owning the things that we did that we're not proud of, it doesn't always feel great. It's not like rainbows and daisies. But if you take responsibility for it and you own it, it feels like empowerment. It feels like progress. It feels productive. It doesn't feel like hopelessness or out of control rage or anger or resentful accommodation. It feels like, yep, that's me. I did it. I owned it. And it's okay that I'm not perfect. I can learn. I can grow. I can move on from this. Self-blame is you did this. You're wrong. You should be ashamed. You're awful. What's wrong with you? Can't you get your act together? That's blame. If you shift in your life to taking responsibility, taking ownership for your mistakes, for all of the things that you do, that you don't do, that you think, that you feel, that you say, that you create as the results in your life, for the emotions, the both positive and negative emotions, you're not going to feel happy all the time. But you will not feel disempowered. You will not feel out of control. And from there, you can make some of the most incredible changes in your life. This is how we uplevel our parenting. This is how we become a Connect method parent, is we take responsibility for our life so we can show up no matter what our kids are doing or saying in a way that we respect. When you retain your responsibility, you retain your ability to change your life. You retain your ability to create an environment where your children can thrive, where they actually want to listen to you, where the relationships get better. And when you can show up, regardless of how off track and crazy the environment is, the behavior is, the words are, the emotions, whatever's happening in your home, you retain the ability to show up in a way you respect. And that's what I've got for you guys today. Have an amazing day, and we'll talk to you next time. If you enjoyed this episode, you're going to want to check out the 8-week parenting pivot, which is the first phase of my program, the League of Extraordinarily Connected Parents. We're opening up a new round in October. So if you're listening to this live, it's going to be October 7th. If you're listening to this and that date has passed, go check out the website, connectmethodparenting.com, and we'll list the next time we're opening. But if you're listening to this live, go check it out because you can already apply and get accepted into the next round so that you can lock yourself in place to have a huge shift with your kids, to get them to want to listen to you, which is very different than using punishments, rewards, timeouts, ultimatums to get them to listen to you. We want it to be more cooperative. We want better listening. We want a great relationship, and we want to have a ton of fun when we're parenting. So if that's what you want, if what I talked about in this episode resonated, jump over to cmp.works/pivot. I'll put the link in the show notes as well, and find out more about the pivot, apply to join, and we'll let you know if you get in. All right. Until next time, go connect with your kids, have a blast, and pop back in for another episode soon about how to use connection, not correction, to get your kids to want to listen to you. See you later. Bye.